All right, I'm the Flat Rate Master, and today we're going to talk about the equipment you need to do J2534 programming. Now, there's lots of misconceptions out there that I want to correct. There's also some stuff that just you need to understand when you get into programming with a JBox that there are some limitations, so we're going to go over some of that kind of stuff. So let's talk about some of those misconceptions and the equipment you will need. Now, first off, you buy a scan tool like the launch tool, like this. I can't tell you how many people send me emails and messages thinking this is what they're going to use to do the programming. It's not. Nobody supports Android operating systems for programming. They don't. You're going to use the JBox that comes with it, and you have to go out and buy a laptop. You can do a desktop too, but it has to be, a Windows PC. You can't use Linux and you can't use Mac unless you use a Windows install inside of whatever, they call it. I forget, I'm not a Mac guy, but you have to use a Windows machine. Now at this point, I believe everybody is still doing Windows 10. So you cannot have Windows 11. You cannot have Windows 7. It has to be Windows 10. And it has to be, 64-bit, not the 32-bit. Why you would have 32-bit, I don't know, but you can't have that kind of system. It has to be a Windows 10 install. You can use something like this Asus. It's a Windows 10 machine, a few years old now. So I'm shining the light at this is a laptop I use for Pico, watching YouTube videos, etc. But it has to be Windows 10. Now you can also go fancy and get like a Toughbook. This is one of the laptops I've used for programming. A little old and outdated, but it doesn't have to be super fancy. It just has to have a big enough SSD to hold whatever programs you need. Now getting into that, you do have to understand there may be some incompatibility issues with different software manufacturers. What I mean by that is if you install, let's say, software for one manufacturer and you install the software for another manufacturer and some of their stuff conflicts, you might have errors in programming. So it's something to really be careful of, and you really need to do research when you add that software. You're going to go to the manufacturer's service website. You can find those on NATSF, the task force, and you can find the websites for their manufacturer that you need to program. You can find the information on those sites, go to them, pay for the subscription, and this is where you need to do some research. Because unfortunately, sometimes you're going to run into things like needing a locksmith license to complete a repair. If you're dealing with later model vehicles, chances are it's going to require a locksmith ID. That means you have to have a locksmith ID, program keys and all that legitimate way. You have to have that. If you don't have that license, you're going to fail because it's not going to let you do it. Now, there are some workarounds for those. Sometimes the thing you need to complete will be in an aftermarket scan tool like the Launch. Sometimes it won't be, so you need to do research on it. There's idiosyncrasies with some manufacturers, Nissan. By that I mean there's some hoops you have to go through is kind of to get everything you need and how you need to set it up and stuff like that. There's a lot of stuff that is just not intuitive. Other drawback is some manufacturers, because of federal law, limit you to powertrain only, meaning all you can program is the ECM and the TCM. You can't program the ABS module. You can't program, a new airbag module. You can't program, chassis control module, stuff like that. So you have to understand what the J standard will allow you to do. Now, one of the things you might wind up having to do is on certain makes and models that you do a lot of is actually get the OEM tool. This is the ICOM for BMW. You might have to invest in the actual OEM tool to be able to do everything you need to do. I can't go over every manufacturer. L1 Diagnostics, I'll link him in the description, has a whole set of courses on programming that you can go watch. He has courses for individual manufacturers on his website. They are paid, but he has some great training on how to do this. It's not really, this is a video that I'm not going to get into individual things. Now, one of the other pieces of equipment you really need to have is a clean power supply. What I mean by that is a regular battery charger has AC ripple in it. That is the bane of existence in programming. You have to get a dedicated power supply for programming. Schumacher has them, Snap-on has them, Chlor has one. There's lots of them on the market. Do yourself a favor. Bare minimum is 100 amps. Even if you don't program BMWs or Land Rovers or stuff like that, do yourself a favor. Spend once, hurt once, because trust me, it's a little scary to be doing a programming event and having the scan tool notice, flash at you voltage too low. It's not fun. The big thing about J2534 programming is you need to understand it's not through the scan tool. It's not through, this tool, the Bosch, anybody that includes a J25 box. Programming is done via a laptop. There are some scan tools that do some programming through their box. It's programming, but they're very outdated files. They're bootlegs. I highly do not recommend them. Especially if you're doing an update to fix a check engine light and you go back a version, not a good thing. So definitely do your due diligence on programming, but this is the equipment you need if you're going to do J2534 programming. Good laptop, good J-box, and scan tool is good for other stuff. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned about is with a J-box, you can get the full software suite for manufacturers. So for instance, Toyota, you can get a subscription, use a J-box and a laptop and have full-featured TechStream. You can do the same thing with GM and get GDS2. So there are some limitations with GDS2 on certain things that you have to have an MDI for. That's the factory interface. But there are some manufacturers that are very heavily into supporting the J standard. Other manufacturers are doing the bare minimum to let you have, the bare minimum they're required by law, and that's it. So that goes into the research you have to do when you're doing programming. So if you're planning on getting into programming, get training. Go to L1 Diagnostics, go to his website, take his classes. That'll give you a good starter, and then continue learning, because trust me, programming is easy until it fails. Then you just have to know how to save your butt. So as always, thanks for watching. I am the Flat Rate Master.